The hallway is 8 feet from the kitchen, and Vera has her hand at my waist and her mouth at my jaw before I have finished deciding what to do with either of those facts. My back finds the wall, not from being pushed, but from the narrowness of the space and the fact that my body has stopped having other ideas. And Vera's breath is warm at the hinge of my jaw, and my hands are flat against the plaster behind me, and every nerve ending in the inside of my wrists is doing something I have not given permission for. She says, against my jaw, the house entirely still around us. "You came early. Then. The bags have been there since Tuesday." My sternum does something structural. A shift, a settling, the way a building's frame adjusts to a new load, and I do not move, and she does not move, and the hallway holds us in the specific geometry of a house that has been waiting for this particular Saturday for approximately 6 months. If you want to hear uncensored too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you're watching from and subscribe. 14 months before the hallway, I took the job because the scope was right and the pay was correct, and the house was the kind of precise that only happens when the person who designed it is also the person who lives in it. I had done my research. I always did my research. And I had found the firm's project portfolio and the planning documentation for the extension on the garden side, and I had formed, before I ever met the architect in question, a professional assessment of the work that was admiring in the specific way that good design earns admiring, and I had told myself the employer was simply part of the scope of the role. I had managed this assessment for approximately 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, the assessment became something I was managing with moderate active effort, cataloging, compartmentalizing, filing under the correct professional heading, and returning to the correct professional heading whenever it wandered, which it began to do with regularity sometime in the 8th week. By the 4th month, I was managing at high effort. By the 8th month, I was managing at the kind of sustained, disciplined effort that is its own form of information, if you are the sort of person who reads information correctly, which I am, and from which I drew the obvious professional conclusion. I was not in a position to develop feelings for my employer. The list of reasons this was true was short and sufficient. I was an employee in her home. I was responsible for the welfare of her children. She had not given me the smallest indication that the professional relationship was anything other than what it was catalogued as, and the feelings in question were going to damage something. The role, the stability I provided in that house, the precise architecture of a working relationship that suited us both, if I allowed them to continue operating at the volume they had reached. I left in March. I gave 4 weeks' notice. I framed the departure as career development, a pivot into interior styling, which I had been wanting to pursue, which was true, which remains true, and which was the second reason. The first reason I did not list on my resignation letter. I spent March through September doing the career development. I was correct that it was the right move. The work suited me, and I was building something real, and the client list was growing, and my professional life was, by any external measure, improving steadily. I thought about the drawing on the fridge, the one the younger one had done in February, finger-painted edges and a careful attempt at lettering in green and purple marker, my name across the bottom, in the 6-year-old's specific handwriting, approximately once a day. I thought about Vera explaining the structural logic of her own hallway at 7 in the morning over coffee, the way she uses her hands to describe load paths, the way she says the word cantilever like it is the only word for something she has been thinking about since before she had words for it. I did not let myself think about the quality of the silence when she was working in the study adjacent to the kitchen. I did not let myself think about the precise arrangement of her in a doorway. I did not, with considerable effort, let myself think about what her voice does to the inside of my chest when she is explaining something she finds genuinely interesting, which has a different quality than her professional voice, and which I had cataloged and filed and returned to the correct folder approximately 800 times in 14 months. I was here for 2 bags. The bags had been at the back of the hallway cupboard, the one near the kitchen, where I had stored winter gear, and 2 boxes of the children's outgrown things that I had meant to take to the charity shop and had not gotten to before the departure. Vera had texted 3 weeks ago. "I've put your bags together. Saturday works if you want to collect them." I had said Saturday works. I had dressed that morning in the cream blouse and the dark jeans, and I had told myself the blouse was a professional choice, a styling choice, a choice appropriate for a Saturday afternoon that was about 2 bags and nothing else. And I had told myself this with some directness, and my body had listened politely and then dressed itself the way it wanted to. I arrived at 4:25, 5 minutes early. I had been precise about the time on the way over, had even briefly slowed down in the last block to arrive at the agreed 4:30, and then had not. There was no architecture to that decision. I had simply arrived when I arrived. Vera had the coffee already poured. Not waiting to be poured, already poured, set on the island, steam still moving off the top of it, the specific ceramic cup she uses for guests, which is different from the one she uses for herself, and which she had selected from the cabinet in the time between my message arriving and my knock at the door. She had opened the door in the fitted blazer and dark jeans and the black silk of the camisole visible at the collar, and the blazer was the kind of thing you put on when you're expecting someone, not the kind of thing you are wearing when you have spent a quiet Saturday at home. And I had noted this and filed it and not looked at it again until I was standing at the kitchen island with my hands on the marble and the 2 bags between us and the coffee warm in my palm. "The new work is going well," Vera said. She was on the far side of the island, the garden window side, where the light was coming in low and gold from the west, the specific quality of a Saturday at 4:30 in a house that has been quiet all day. "You've got residential clients now." 3, I said. 1 referral from the second. "That's good." She was looking at me in the way she looks when she is actually looking, not the professional gaze, but the other one, the one I had filed and refiled and eventually given up filing because the folder kept not holding it. "The pivot suits you." I did not know what to do with this, so I did not do anything, which is generally my approach to things I do not know what to do with. I held the coffee cup and stood at the island and let the afternoon stay where it was. The 2 bags were on my side of the counter. Brown canvas, familiar, mine from before the roll, brought to this house with their own contents and now repacked with 14 months of small accumulation. They had been there since Tuesday, Vera said. I had not touched them. I was not ready to be efficient about the bags yet. I recognized this about myself and did not investigate it. "There's a project I'm working on," Vera said. She had moved, not toward me, just a repositioning from the window side to the counter side, which put her closer to the center of the kitchen rather than the perimeter. Her hands were on the counter, both of them, open and flat on the marble in a way I recognized from 14 months of watching her think through problems in this room. "Commission in Dalston. The main staircase has a structural problem. The load-bearing element doesn't sit correctly with the spatial geometry I want." "What's the spatial geometry?" "I want it to feel like the staircase is the house's spine. Not decorative, structural in a legible way, where you can see how the building holds itself." I understood what she meant. I had lived in this house for 14 months, had run it, had learned every room's logic, and I knew exactly what she meant about the hallway. The way she had explained it, the spine, the central load, the place from which everything else in the plan extends. I had listened to her say it and understood it and stored the understanding in the part of me that was trying to behave professionally and which was losing the argument from approximately month 4. "The problem," she continued, "is the turn at the landing. The geometry wants to continue up in a single sight line, and the structural solution keeps requiring a turn the geometry doesn't want." "Can you cantilever past the turn?" She stopped. Not a conversational pause. A full stop. The kind where whatever was next in the sentence does not arrive because something else arrived instead. She was looking at my hands on the counter, I realized. Not at my face. At my hands, where they rested on the marble, both of them, fingers spread slightly in the way I hold myself when I am listening carefully, which she would have seen me do in this kitchen on 800 mornings. 4 seconds. The house made its specific Saturday afternoon sound around us. The garden outside, faint, the building's own warmth and settling. The kind of silence that is only silence if you do not know its specific texture. And I knew its specific texture. I had been living inside it for 14 months and it was still in my body the way your first language is still in your body. Vera said, "Yes. Nothing else." And then she picked up the coffee cup and turned toward the kitchen window and said, "To the garden, not to me." "I've been thinking about the cantilever for 3 weeks. I understood that we were not talking about the staircase. I did not say this." I held the warmth of the marble under my palms and let the afternoon keep moving at the pace it was moving, which was slowly, as Saturday afternoons in this house have always moved, the light from the garden windows coming in long and gold and landing on both our forearms on the counter surface in a way that was so specific and so known to me. 14 months of afternoons in this kitchen, this light, this counter, that my throat did something involuntary and quiet that I decided not to investigate. The drawing was on the fridge behind her. I had seen it when I walked in, had seen it immediately, the way you see something you have been thinking about without naming. Green and purple finger-painted frame, careful letters across the bottom, my name in the 6-year-old script. It had been on the fridge in February when I left, and it was on the fridge now, 6 months later, in September, which meant someone had kept it there. I did not calculate what it meant that someone had kept it there. I filed it in the folder that was full and looked at the coffee cup in my hands. "You left the drawing," Vera said. She was not looking at the fridge. She was looking at me. I said, "I know." The room was very still. The drawing was on the fridge. The 2 bags were on the counter between us. The coffee cup was warm in my hands, and I was aware of every inch of the island counter that I was not crossing, and the quality of the afternoon light on the marble, and the way Vera's hands were still flat and open on the counter's surface, 3 feet from mine, and the fact that she had moved. At some point in the conversation about the staircase, she had moved from the center of the kitchen to the near side of the island, which had reduced the distance between us by a meter, and I had not registered the movement as a movement, only as a fact, which is exactly how all the important facts about Vera have always arrived in me. Not as events, but as conditions I am already inside before I have noticed entering them. The light was coming in long from the garden windows. Both our forearms were on the marble. The warmth of the stone was specific and even. Neither of us had moved our hands in the last 3 minutes. Vera set her hand down 6 inches from mine, not reaching, not a gesture. She simply set it down, open flat on the marble surface, with approximately 6 inches of counter between her fingers and my fingers, and then she left it there. The hand did not move, the 6 inches did not change. I was looking at the hand and not at her face, and my own hands on the counter had gone very still in the way that stillness is not stillness, but its opposite. My pulse was in my palms. Specifically my palms, flat on the marble, the warmth of the stone and the warmth of my own blood doing 2 different things in the same surface. I did not close the 6 inches. She did not close the 6 inches. The house made its Saturday sound around us. The garden, very faint, a distant ordinary Saturday outside the kitchen windows, the building's own structure settling in the warmth. I had been in this silence 800 times. I knew its frequency and its specific weight, and I knew what it meant when the silence in this kitchen was this particular kind of full, which it had been, in the final months, with a regularity I had categorized as the reason I needed to leave. The drawing was on the fridge, my name in purple marker, 6 inches of counter between our hands. I thought about the cantilever. I thought about structural problems that do not resolve because the geometry does not want what the solution requires. I thought about the way Vera had stopped mid-sentence and looked at my hands on the marble instead of finishing the sentence, and the way the 4 seconds of silence had landed in my chest with more specificity than most sentences. I was here for 2 bags. The bags were on the counter. Neither of us had touched them. The afternoon light from the garden was gold on the marble and on both our forearms and on the 6 inches of counter between our hands. I could smell the kitchen, the house's specific scent, cedar and something warm from the afternoon sun on the wooden cabinets, the particular air of a room that has been quietly inhabited all day and knows it. I had missed this smell with a thoroughness I had not admitted to myself until I was standing in it again, feeling my body recognize it before my mind had organized a response. Vera's hand did not move. I watched it not move for what was probably 30 seconds and what felt considerably longer. Then she moved it. Not away. She moved it across the 6 inches of counter and set it over my hand, palm over knuckles, the full weight of her hand, held completely still. Her skin was cooler than I expected, and then warming immediately. The contact was not a question. It was a statement of something that had been true for longer than the 6 inches of counter would suggest, and the something landed in my chest with the specific weight of a structural fact. Load-bearing, not decorative. I looked up from our hands on the counter. She was looking at me. Not the professional gaze, not the cataloged and filed gaze. The other one, the one I had given up filing because no folder held it. Except close now, the island between us not feeling like the island it was because she was leaning and her hand was over my hand on the marble. And the late afternoon was gold on both our faces, and the house around us had gone to a silence that was not quiet at all. The blazer was on the kitchen chair. I had not noticed the moment she removed it. It was simply there now, laid over the chair back, the dark fabric folded where she had set it. And she was in the camisole, the black silk catching the late afternoon light at her collarbone and her shoulders. And I looked at this, without performing, not looking, because I had been performing not looking for 14 months and I was apparently finished with that. She said, her hand still over mine, "Leave the bags." I did not say anything. My hands on the counter were very warm, her palm over my knuckles, the marble warm beneath, my pulse in my skin with nowhere to go. She said, "Come here." She had not let go of my hand. She moved from around the island toward the hallway, the 8 feet from the kitchen to the base of the stairs, and she kept her hand around mine as she walked and I went, which did not feel like following because the word following implies a hesitation I did not have. My body had been making this decision since March. It was simply executing now. The hallway at the base of the stairs is the house's spine. Vera has explained this. The central load-bearing element, the place from which the plan extends in both directions, the narrowest and most structural space in the building. She had explained it on a Tuesday morning over coffee, 7 months before I left, with her hands describing the geometry and me standing 2 feet away, telling myself I was listening to an architectural explanation, which I was, and which was not all I was doing. The hallway is narrow, wide enough for 2 people to pass, not wide enough for 2 people to pass without the passing being a negotiation of space. She walked me the 8 feet from the kitchen and turned, and my back was at the wall before I had fully registered the turn. The plaster cool through the cream blouse at my shoulder blades, the hallway's specific interior coolness after the warmth of the kitchen, and she was between me and the kitchen, her hand finally releasing mine, going instead to the wall beside my shoulder, the heel of her palm braced there and her body close. Not pressed. Close. The distinction matters. She was close enough that I was breathing her in at every inhale. Cedar and something cold, the specific clean architecture of her, warmed now by the afternoon and by proximity. And I had filed this smell 100 times in 14 months, and I was not filing it now. Now I was just breathing it. Her other hand was at my waist. The warmth of it through the cream blouse, her palm at the point where my waist curves, not gripping, just present, just the weight of her hand registering through fabric. And my whole side was paying attention to that specific square of warmth with an attention that left no resources for anything else. I looked up at her. She was looking down at me. The hallway was lit from the kitchen light reaching it, gold, low, the staircase above us in soft shadow, and her face in that light was the face I had been not thinking about for 6 months with the specific effort of someone who is thinking about something very hard. Her jaw was at my jaw. Not quite. Almost. The almost was considerable. She was at the distance where I could feel the warmth of her face without contact, a 1/4 inch maybe, the breadth of space between her jaw and mine. And my hands were flat at the wall behind me, and my breathing was the slowest I could manage it, which was not slow. She said at my jaw, the house entirely still around us. "You came early," she said. "The bags have been there since Tuesday." I felt the words more than heard them, low, close, the specific quality of her voice at this register, doing the thing it does to the inside of my chest, which I had catalogued as something to monitor and which was past monitoring now. My sternum was doing something involuntary and architectural, a resettling, a load redistribution, and I kept my hands at the wall and my breathing at its current, inadequate pace. She lifted her face then, from the jaw distance to the above distance, her arm braced on the wall, her face at the approximate height of my collarbone. And she was looking at me from there, her hand still at my waist, and the geometry of us in this hallway was the specific geometry of a structural problem that only has one solution, regardless of what the geometry wants. "Tell me," she said, "what the career development was." She did not mean the interior styling. She did not mean the residential clients or the referral chain or the professional pivot that was genuinely going well. She meant the reason I had written on the resignation letter and beneath it, the reason I had not. The hallway was cool at my back and warm at my front, where she was close, and the house was quiet in the way that this house gets quiet on Saturday afternoons, which is not quiet, but is instead a specific presence I know by frequency. The drawing was visible from here, on the fridge through the kitchen doorway, the green and purple frame, and my name in purple marker, visible from the hallway, from exactly where I was standing. I said, "The career development was real." "Yes," she said. "What else?" The plaster was cool against my shoulder blades. Her hand at my waist was warm, specific, steady, not moving. I could smell the kitchen through the doorway and cedar from the warmth of her at this distance, and my hands at the wall behind me had nowhere to go and nothing useful to do. She said, quieter, "Cass." And that did it. My name in that register, in this hallway, in this house, at this particular fraction of distance. That did it. Opened the folder that had been overfull for 14 months, and I looked at her, and I said, plainly, at collarbone distance, with the hallway's plaster at my back and the afternoon's gold reaching us from the kitchen. I left because staying was going to cost more than I could afford to spend on something I had no evidence was anything other than mine. The hallway went very still. She looked at me. Then the arm at the wall changed. I felt it before I saw it, the shift in the quality of her weight against the wall beside me, from a brace to something else, the arm bending at the elbow and her face coming down from the above distance to something much closer, and her mouth at my collarbone was warm and unhurried and exact. The silk of the blouse between her lips and my skin, and the warmth of it traveling inward with the specificity of something I had been not thinking about for 14 months, and which my body registered as, yes, this. This is the thing the body has been keeping an account of. I made a sound, small. I filed it nowhere. Her mouth moved a fraction at my collarbone, not further down, not exploring, just present, the warmth of it steady and deliberate. And her hand at my waist found the hem of the blouse, the place where the cotton had come slightly untucked in the hallway's warmth, and her fingers were at the buttons there, not opening, just at them. The heel of her palm warm through the fabric, and the awareness of her fingers at the open collar, moving down my front, like a tide going out, unhurried, certain of where it is going. My hands came off the wall. I had not decided this. My hands simply left the plaster and went to her, one to the silk of the camisole at her ribcage, the warmth of the fabric and the warmth beneath it registering together, and one to the back of her neck. And the back of her neck was the specific warmth of someone who has been holding themselves controlled for a very long time and is now, incrementally, choosing not to. She exhaled. The breath of it against my collarbone, warm, deliberate, held longer than a simple exhale. And the arm that had braced at the wall shifted again, this time to my shoulder, the heel of her palm at the point where my collarbone meets my shoulder, and she set the weight of it there, gently, as though she was calculating exactly how much of herself to set down and in which order. The house was completely still, the garden outside, the staircase above in soft shadow. The kitchen behind her, gold and empty, the 2 bags on the counter visible through the doorway if either of us had been looking, which neither of us was, the drawing on the fridge, her mouth at my collarbone, her hand at my waist at the buttons, my hand at the back of her neck where the silk of her camisole's thin strap ends and her skin begins. I thought, I left this house to prevent this. I thought, my body has apparently been building a structural argument since March, and the argument is complete, and the conclusion is that prevention was not the correct architecture. What I said was nothing. I pressed my hand slightly at the back of her neck, the smallest increase of pressure, the back of my fingers against the warm skin below her hairline, and felt her go still for one beat, the way a building goes still just before it settles into a new configuration. And then she moved her mouth from my collarbone to my jaw, and her hand at my waist tightened. Not much, just enough to know the difference. Just enough that my entire left side filed a formal objection to every decision I had made in the last 6 months. That was not this. She was not losing control. This is what I knew, in the narrowness of the hallway with the plaster at my back and cedar in every breath. She was not losing control. She was releasing it, selectively, with the specific precision of an architect who understands that a controlled release is not a collapse. A load deliberately transferred is still the architect's choice. She was choosing. This was not her composure failing. This was her composure making a different decision. Her jaw against mine, her breath at my ear, warm, even, slow in a way that was not natural, and which cost her something to maintain. I set my other hand against her ribs, under the blazer's absence, against the silk of the camisole directly, and felt the warmth of her ribs through the silk and the specific quality of her breathing. Her exhales measured, her inhales arriving a fraction slower than they should, the beautiful and legible evidence that this was costing her something, and she was paying it anyway. She said, against my jaw, very low, the house completely still around us. 6 months. Not a question. 6 months, I said back. She made a sound against my jaw that was not words. Low, brief. The sound of someone who has been holding a structural argument of their own for a very long time and has just been told the opposing counsel agrees. Her mouth moved to the corner of my jaw. The heel of her hand at my shoulder pressed slightly, and she was at the wall then, her body close, her weight at the wall beside me, both of us in the hallway's narrow width, with the kitchen light reaching us from behind her, and the staircase in its soft shadow above. I had been in this hallway 800 times. I had passed through it every morning for 14 months, had stood at its base, looking up at the children's rooms above, had set grocery bags down on the hallway floor while sorting keys, had heard the particular acoustic of this space. The way a conversation in the kitchen carries differently here. The way the house's structure makes this the quietest and loudest room at once. I was in it now with Vera's mouth at my jaw and her hand at the open collar of my blouse, and the afternoon's late light from the kitchen at our backs, and I was not managing anything. I was not cataloging or filing or returning things to their correct professional headings. I was here, in the spine of the house, being held at the wall by someone who had been standing on the other side of a kitchen island from me for 30 minutes, and had apparently spent that 30 minutes making a decision with the same thoroughness she applies to cantilevers. Her hand found the second button from the top. She stopped there, not opening, just at it, her fingertip against the button, warm through the cotton, the blouse's warmth and her warmth together, creating a heat that was nothing like the ambient temperature of the hallway and which landed in my sternum with the quality of something irreversible. She said, at my jaw, "You could have told me." I said, "I know." She said, "You should have told me." I said, "I know that too." "Then why?" "Because," I said, and I had to stop, because the word had arrived before the sentence was ready, and I organized it. The hallway, the house is quiet, her fingertip at my button. 14 months of evidence I had filed incorrectly. And I said, "Because I had no evidence, and I wasn't willing to damage the work for a feeling I couldn't verify." She went still. The complete stillness, not the controlled stillness, the other kind, the kind that arrives when something has landed that reorganizes the whole structure. Her fingertip at my button, her jaw at my jaw, the house around us in its full Saturday quiet. She said, "The drawing," I said. "Yes," she said. "I kept it for 6 months." I said, "I know." She lifted her face from my jaw and looked at me. The hallway's light, kitchen gold reaching us from behind her, was on both our faces, and she was looking at me the way she had been looking at me for probably much longer than 6 months, and which I had filed and refiled and given up filing, and which now had nowhere left to be filed because it was here, directly in the narrow spine of the house. "The bags," she said, "have been there since Tuesday." "You told me." "I put them there on Tuesday," she said, "because I needed them to be an actual reason for you to come back. And then I couldn't move them because if you moved them yourself when you arrived, that was the end, and I wasn't." She stopped. Her jaw moved. I wasn't ready for the end to be the end. My hands were at her ribs, both of them now, the silk of the camisole warm under my palms, her breathing under that warmth, the specific arithmetic of her ribcage expanding and contracting at the pace of someone who is saying something true, and it is costing them. I said, "The bags aren't going anywhere tonight." She looked at me. "The bags," I said, "can stay exactly where they are." Something in her face changed. Not collapsed, changed, the way a structure changes when a load it has been holding is redistributed deliberately, the geometry rearranging into something more honest. Her mouth curved at one corner. Not a full smile. Vera does not do full smiles at high tension. She does this. And she set her forehead against mine, both of us in the narrow hallway, her hands at my waist and my hands at her ribs. "You were the most competent person I'd employed," she said. "It was unreasonably inconvenient." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry." "You're not." "No," I said. "Not especially." Her laugh was very quiet, almost silent. The sound of it in the hallway was specific and brief, and it landed in my chest in a way I had no folder for and was not trying to create one. She brought her mouth to the point of my jaw, deliberate, unhurried, the warmth of her lips at the exact place where my jaw meets my ear. And she stayed there, not moving, and I tipped my head, and my hands at her ribs pulled her very slightly closer, and the house held us in the specific stillness of a building that has been waiting for something to settle. What followed was not fast. Vera does not do anything fast. This is information I had gathered across 14 months in this house, and which remained entirely accurate. She is precise and deliberate, and she attends to things with a completeness of attention that I had catalogued as professionally admirable, and which turned out to have additional applications. Every movement was considered. Every place she set her hands was a decision. The black silk camisole in the late afternoon light and the particular warmth of a narrow hallway at 4:45 on a Saturday were all present as the facts of the specific room, the specific house, the specific 14 months and 6 months I was arriving from. I was here. That was the only architecture that mattered. She kissed me in the hallway of her house at the base of her stairs, her mouth warm and certain on mine, her hand at the small of my back where the cream blouse had finally fully come untucked, and my hands at the back of her neck where her hair was loose against my fingers, and the house was entirely still around us. The faint garden outside, the staircase above in its soft shadow, the kitchen with the 2 bags on the counter, and the coffee cups and the gold afternoon going slowly amber. She did not hurry. She did not collapse. She moved in the way she moves when she has made a decision completely, with the full weight of it, deliberately, every increment chosen. My back was at the plaster and her weight was at me and my hands and her hair and her mouth on mine, in the specific temperature differential of the hallway. The cool plaster, the warm camisole, the warmth of her lips, the warmth of the afternoon reaching us from the kitchen. And I thought, this is the house's spine. This is the place from which the plan extends. I thought, the structural problem of the thing I have been carrying for 14 months is that it was not a problem. It was the load-bearing element. It was what was holding everything up all along. I did not say this, I said, against her mouth when she paused. You put on the blazer. She looked at me. Before I arrived, I said. You put on the blazer. Her expression did not change. She said. The coffee was already poured. Yes, I said. She said. I knew what the career development was. I went still. She said. I knew in February, before you left. Vera, I didn't act on it, she said, because you were in my home. You were employed in my home with my children, and you had given me no formal indication, which I was not going to assume a direction I could not verify. I was looking at her. The hallway, the house's stillness. And then you left, she said. Yes? And I spent 6 months, she said, learning exactly how large a role is when it is the absence of it. My hands were at her ribs, her hands at my waist, both of us in the hallway, with the afternoon going amber around us and the house completely quiet. I thought about 14 months of managing the assessment. I thought about 6 months of career development. I thought about the drawing on the fridge and the coffee already poured, and the bags that had been there since Tuesday, the official reason for the visit, unmoved. The cantilever, I said. Yes, she said. It was always the answer. I just needed a geometry that could hold it. She kissed me again. Less restrained this time. Not less controlled, but less restricted in the distinction, which is the distinction that matters with Vera. She had been contained for 6 months, and before that for 8 months of managing the professional weight of something she had known and not acted on. And the release of that containment was measured and deliberate, and it landed on my mouth with the specific quality of something that had been accumulating for a long time, and was now, finally, doing what it had always had the weight to do. I held her, both hands in the silk of the camisole, the warmth of her ribs, her breathing under my palms now unconcealed, fuller, different, the pace of someone who has stopped managing the pace, the afternoon amber through the kitchen doorway, the staircase above in shadow, the house in its full Saturday stillness, the garden outside, the ceiling above us, the walls that hold the load. We were in the hallway for a long time. I do not have a precise accounting of the time. I have an accounting of the light. It shifted twice while we were there, the kitchen's gold going to amber, and then to the softer, early evening light that this house gets when the sun clears the garden trees. And I have an accounting of the quality of the silence, which changed. The way a silence changes when the thing it was holding finally releases, settling into something different and not quieter, but less full of the weight of the thing it was containing. She brought her forehead to mine, eventually. Both of us still in the hallway. She said, "Are you hungry?" I laughed. The specific shock of the ordinary question in the exact, current, extraordinary context. I laughed and felt the laugh move through her where my hands were at her ribs, and she made a sound against my forehead that was the closest to a laugh Vera makes, brief and precise and warmer than she would probably acknowledge. Possibly, I said. There's food, she said. The children aren't back until Sunday evening. I absorbed the information in the order it arrived. There was food. The children were absent until Sunday evening. Sunday was tomorrow. This was information with an architecture, and the architecture was clear, and I looked at her in the hallway's amber light, and she looked at me, and neither of us said anything about the architecture. The bags, I said. The bags, she agreed, are on the counter. Where they've been since Tuesday. Yes. And they're staying there tonight. She looked at me for a moment. Something in her face, very briefly, was less composed than usual. Not broken, simply open, the specific expression of someone who has been holding something correctly for a very long time and has just been told they can set it down. It was brief. Then the composure returned, adjusted, recalibrated for the new geometry. "Yes," she said. "They're staying there tonight." We ate in the kitchen. She cooked, efficiently, precisely as she does everything, and I sat on the counter where I had sat on Tuesday mornings for 14 months while the coffee went and the house woke up, and the amber went to evening and the kitchen lights came on and the house's evening sounds came in, the garden darker, the street quieter. She talked about the Dalston project. I talked about the residential client with the difficult brief. We talked about the children, the younger one's current obsession, the older one's complicated social landscape. And I ate the food she had cooked and sat on the counter I knew, and the kitchen was the kitchen I had managed for 14 months, and it was entirely itself and entirely different. At some point, without discussion, we moved to the sitting room. At some point after that, the evening was full, and the house was dark outside the windows and the lights were low. I will not be accounting for all of it. I will be accounting for the specific facts. Her hand at the back of my neck, in the sitting room, her thumb at the top of the spine, just below the hairline, the warmth of it, the specific quality of that pressure, deliberate and held for a moment before moving, the weight of her against the sitting room couch, the sound of her breathing finally without management, full, real, at the pace it wanted to be. I will be accounting for the stillness afterward, the house around us, the garden beyond the window, the specific dark of a September evening. Her face in the low light, composed and different, the composure wearing the expression of someone who has put something down. I said, at some point in the stillness, "You put the drawing in the bag." She was quiet for a moment. "It needed to stay with you," she said. "It was there for 6 months." "Yes," she said. "And then it needed to be with you." I thought about the bag, the zip, half open, the drawing on top of everything else, the green and purple finger-painted frame, my name across the bottom in the 6-year-old's careful script, sitting on top of 14 months of small accumulation, placed there by the only person who could have placed it, which was the woman next to me in the low light of the sitting room of the house I had managed and left and come back to for 2 bags. "She'll want to know it's safe," I said. "She will." "What will you tell her?" Vera was quiet for a moment, then she said, "That it's with someone who's coming back." The room was still. Outside, the September garden, the dark, the ordinary quiet of a Saturday evening on a residential street. Inside, the low light, the sitting room, the house's evening settling. I said, "The bags are on the counter." "Yes, both of them. Both of them." We were quiet. The house held us the way it holds everything, structurally, without announcement, from the spine outward. The hallway at the base of the stairs where the load runs through. The kitchen with its garden windows and the evening dark beyond them. The 2 bags on the counter, exactly where they had been since Tuesday. The official reason for the visit, the document of the departure, undisturbed. On top of everything in the open bag, the drawing, green and purple. My name in purple marker, slightly smeared at the C in the way a 6-year-old's letters smear when the paint is wet and the small hand is still learning the weight of the pen. Vera was beside me in the low light, her shoulder against mine, her breathing the pace it wanted to be. The bags were on the counter. Nobody had moved them. The visit was not over, and nobody was resolving the bags tonight, and the drawing was in the bag now instead of on the fridge. And it was there because she had put it there, which is evidence of something the house already knew and which I was only now catching up to. I stayed.